Remember the guy who called Puerto Rico the island of floating garbage? That so-called joke has rattled the Trump campaign and ignited the ire of many prominent Puerto Ricans. Well, an unexpected person thinks that comedian Tony Hinchcliffe is funny.
In retrospect, having a roast comedian come to a political rally a week before Election Day and roasting a key voting demographic, probably not the best decision by the campaign politically. But to be fair, the guy's really just doing what he does. I mean, bringing him to a rally and have him not do roast jokes, that'd be like bringing Beyonce to a rally and not have... Oh.
So, I mean, that was certainly unexpected coming from John Stewart, of all people. He does buck the Liberal line in some respect. I have previously thought he was right to buck the Liberal line. I think he's wrong here. I didn't like the joke and I thought it was a racist joke. But, I mean, I guess he's making the point that Hinchcliffe is, as he put it, a roast comedian. You know what you're going to get. I didn't see the John segment in full, so I don't know if he was making the argument that the Trump campaign were wrong to get him to do that in the first place. But, you know, it's an interesting debate, I guess.
Yeah, and that's kind of the insinuation, right, is that it's not really on the comedian or the joke or even that he did something wrong by saying that joke at the rally, but that maybe it was on the Trump campaign for inviting him and not thinking about what it is that he does. I mean, if you go back to his roast of Tom Brady, there were jokes that were far and away that could be considered more offensive or racist than anything he said during this Trump political rally. And I think the larger point here is, regardless of whether or not you found the joke funny, clearly the people at the rally didn't really find it funny because the guy basically bombed his entire set, and then the Trump campaign immediately distanced itself from it, which they very rarely do. Regardless of whether or not you find it funny, this was a distraction from what could have been a really successful political event and has been basically suffocating the news cycle until we get to Biden's gaffe last evening.
Well, so that's the thing. So we now have had two events, one from each candidate, where they were about to have what was supposed to be a big success, and their own side, in a sense, has messed it up. Trump was going to go to Madison Square Garden, heart of New York City, a very legendary venue. Yes, there were people talking about, other events in the 1930s, which I thought was an overextended analogy, to put it mildly. But the point is there that, there's this supposedly celebratory Trump event that is intended to push him into the last week of the campaign, and it's undercut by this comedian making what I thought was a racist joke. Other people don't think it was a racist joke. The controversy over whether it was a racist joke or not consumes, as you say, 2 days. Then Kamala Harris has her big moment at the Ellipse, seems to go well on its surface, and Biden messes her up with his remark. So it is kind of bizarre in that respect. I do wonder, I mean, do you think, in the case of Hinchcliffe, so not only Trump, but the Trump sort of movement likes to be, I guess, anti-establishment, kind of sticking a finger up against orthodoxy and all of that. Do you think that can sort of blow up in their face because it sort of feeds into like hiring people like him to do comedy?
Maybe. I mean, in this case, you could make that argument, but I think generally because the trust in institutions and specifically the mainstream media is so low that the benefits outweigh the potential drawbacks, because people like to see Trump as the outsider candidate, and he didn't really have that benefit in 2020, obviously, which I think hurt him in a lot of ways. And now he's able to be the outsider again. Not only is he not in political office, but he's also fighting against multiple indictments that his supporters view as politically motivated from the DOJ. You have him aligning with people who were not traditionally Republicans, like Tulsi Gabbard and Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and then he's doing all of these podcasts that are independent podcasts, like Theo Vaughn, like Joe Rogan. J.D. Vance was on Tim Dillon this past week and is also set to appear on Joe Rogan. For people who like Trump because he's not a politician, I think that's actually a huge benefit for him. Yeah,
I wonder about that in relation to Harris, because she obviously is running a much more orthodox campaign. She has done some podcasts, but typically, her model is, well, we'll go on 60 Minutes and we'll do the fairly serious policy interview. And 60 Minutes still reaches a huge audience. I'm not knocking that, but she's running a more conventional campaign, and Trump has been Trump, so it's obviously never going to be a conventional campaign, and the polls appear deadlocked, but I wonder, is it more difficult for her as an incumbent vice president to to really connect with people who do feel disaffected in some way because you look at too much like the inside candidate.
That's a good point. And one of the things that she's struggling with is that there are a lot of disaffected Democrats that she's trying to reach. And her campaign has talked about that strategy, getting both disaffected Democrats, I mean, particularly the uncommitted voters from the primary, and then also Republicans who don't like Trump. And the question is, okay, well, the Republicans who don't like Trump typically don't like him because they prefer the establishment wing of the party. But the disaffected Democrats are the opposite, right? They tend to be progressives who are unhappy with the state of the Biden administration, particularly its policy on Israel. So I think she kind of finds herself between a rock and a hard place there.
Right, and she hasn't really found a way to thread that needle at all, I don't think. In relation to, John Stewart, I mean, firstly, the capacity to say something unusual, I think, is good in the current media environment, and he did do that way back. Remember, there was the famous one where he was mocking people who were mocking the Chinese explanation or the Wuhan explanation for COVID.
That's right.
And he was saying about, an explosion in Hershey, Pennsylvania and chocolate and all that. So he seems able to sort of buck that trend in a way that doesn't get him cancelled, but also doesn't really show him leaning more into a sort of conservative position. I mean, I think that's quite unusual in this day and age.
Yeah, it's him and Bill Maher are basically the only ones who have really done that, especially out of the quote-unquote late-night comics, and I think it's refreshing. I mean, I watch Bill Maher pretty much every Friday because it's unexpected, right? I don't know what he's going to say, and that's why I think some of the endorsements that the Harris campaign has been leaning on are not particularly effective because it's from people who are traditionally Democrats, right? It's like, okay, well, we know Beyonce's voting for the Democrat. Sure, she's going to go to a rally and get the base motivated, but is she helping Kamala really bring in new voters? I'm not sure that's the case.
I hope you're not going to be insulting Bruce Springsteen, Amber. I might have to take some issues now if that
Well,
happens.
It's funny you bring that up because I have been a Bruce Springsteen hater since long before he was an out Democrat.
I shall be slapping my papers down in disgust at this point.
I know it's solely about his music, but
maybe our commenters have strong views on
I know the entire comment base is going to turn on me right after that.
Going to be pro or anti-Springsteen. Well, we will have politics and perhaps not so much music in later segments, but stick with us. More coming up in Rising Sun.